Okay, so we're in the series called The Dark Passenger. And I'm liking it and hating it all at the same time. I can't explain it. It's this love-hate relationship. And for those of you who don't know, I need to give you a little bit of a background of where the series came from. It gives you a little insight into the mind that is LifePoint and how we do things. The Dark Passenger series is based on a TV show called Dexter. I don't know if you're not familiar with it. I'll give you a little bit of a background, because judging by some of the stares, you're not familiar with it, or you are. And I'm sorry. I don't know which that is. But the series Dexter is about this guy who's a blood spatter expert for the Miami Police Department. But he has a secret that nobody knows. He's a serial killer. He has this compulsion. And in his growing up, his father, who was a police officer, has helped steer him in the direction to try to use this very wicked and evil thing for good, if that's even possible. And so he's got this code that he lives by, that he only kills other serial killers and gets rid of them. And it's this weird show. And I watch it like a deer caught in the headlights, like I can't take my eyes off of it. It's such a great show. But throughout, it's interesting because when the series started, Dexter was this emotionless, this uncaring, this blank person, this monster, who put on a great show on the outside, but on the inside he was vile and evil and dirty and angry and bitter. And as the series has progressed, he's somehow become more human. He's become more in touch with things around him, and caring that seemed to be so foreign to him now seems to happen. There's people in his life that he figures that he's learned that he would rather die for. And it's this weird kind of evolution from nothingness, monster, wearing a mask, to this human who actually has relationships that mean something to him and a life that means something to him. And it's this bizarre trend. But throughout the whole thing, the battle that he struggles with in this series is what he calls his dark passenger. And those around him, he kind of shares it as if it's just an addiction, and he never tells what his addiction is, but he talks about this dark passenger who he loves and hates at the same time, that he feels excited about the wrongness of everything that he's doing, and yet he hates himself for it at the same time, and he just doesn't know how to resolve this dark passenger, this controlling thing. And the reason I wanted to do this series, and I think this is kind of a good place to start, kind of as a recap. The reason I really wanted to do this series is because I have looked at our churches and I have looked at Christianity as a whole, and I have seen it become a religion of guilt over redemption. I have seen it become a place where we repress the darkness and we suppress it inside and put a mask in front of it, instead of releasing it to the light of God and allowing Him to expel it. And so what we do is, instead of actually find freedom, what we find is a new mask to put over what's inside of us. And we hide it from everyone around us. And so our relationships are shallow. Not just with each other, but our relationship with God. Because we wear the same mask to Him. For some reason, we think He doesn't see behind the facade. And so in this process, I feel like we're going to have a Scooby-Doo reveal. And if that doesn't make any sense to you, if you know Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo ends the same way every single time. And it's actually kind of amusing, because the enemy in Scooby-Doo is never the enemy. Like, the villain is never the villain. And here's how a Scooby-Doo ending goes. I'm not going to actually do the voices, but I'm sorry. James? Sorry, I'm just not that good. So, every Scooby-Doo ending ends up with, like, they're at this place, it's being haunted by this monster, and driving everybody out, and everyone's really upset because, you know, the person who actually owns the place is really upset. So these kids come in with their little dog, come in, and they try to solve the crime of this monster. And so when they finally catch the monster, right, it's always the same thing. Well, it's not really a monster, and they pull the mask off, and they're like, it's Mr. Smith. Well, he had tons to gain, right? Because, like, if he could get everybody out there, maybe the property level would drop, and the entire area's property level would drop, and then they just buy it up, and he'd be this real estate tycoon, right? It's Mr. Smith. But it's never Mr. Smith. There's always another mask. Mr. Smith is wearing a mask too. This is so funny. And so they reveal, and they pull the mask off, and it's the groundskeeper, right? Because he had the most to gain from driving everyone away. And so it's this weird thing. Now, I've always had this real problem with this. If you're a villain and you're wearing a monster costume, who has the foresight to think, I might get caught, and they're going to pull my mask off? So I'm going to wear a mask under the mask, and they'll never know. Right? I feel you're right, it is. It's this idea of the supervillain. I'm that smart, and obviously not that smart, because if he was, he would have had a third mask. Scooby-Doo always finds the second one. And so I feel like we have to have a Scooby-Doo kind of reveal here, because what we did last week is we talked about us as individuals. We said we're wearing a mask, right? That's not the real us. The person that you're sitting next to is not the person that's really there, because probably they're wearing a mask. They've been hiding something from you, and we understand. We'll get into why we hide all this stuff. A lot of it is we feel we'll be rejected. People won't like us if they know the real me and what's really inside of me. And so we wear this mask. And so last week we pulled the mask off, and we're like, oh, it's the dark passenger. I get it. It's the dark passenger. But it's not just the dark passenger. There's another mask. What is this dark passenger? What is this war that we have in ourselves? That when we constantly struggle, I wonder how many of you think sometimes that you might be schizophrenic. I mean, honestly, by show of hands, I want to know. No, I'm okay. Like, nobody's like, do I raise my hand? Am I going to get committed? I wonder sometimes how many of us feel a little schizophrenic. How many of you find yourselves in situations with two voices echoing at you, telling you what to do? I want to do this, but I want to do this. I want to do both for some reason, but I know only one's right, one's wrong, and I feel torn and I don't know what to do, and there's this war. And we talked about Paul saying he totally understood this, right? In Romans chapter 7, he says, why is it that the thing that I want to do, I don't do, but the very thing I hate, I always find myself doing? I found that inside me there's a war going on. There's this war going on inside of me. What is it, this dark passenger, that we're constantly fighting with? I think Scripture kind of gives us a reveal as to what this war is, and I'd like to share it with you. It's in James chapter 1. Most of you are probably familiar with it. It's my book. I wrote this. I always feel smart. Thank you. Apparently Dr. Youre can do the Scooby-Doo voices. I always feel smarter when I read James. You would too. My blog is jamesloss.com. If you want to be smarter too. No. Book of James chapter 1, I'm going to read in verse 14. I love this passage. And I kind of hate this passage at the same time as I read it. It says, but each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by what? His own desire. Ooh! It's always somebody close to you, isn't it? Like, that's who always gets you. Because like in Scooby-Doo, it's the groundskeeper. He's been there for 50 years. Like, he's like the friend. It's always somebody close to us. And now here we are in this Scooby-Doo reveal. Like, as we look at it, it's like, okay, there's somebody, we're wearing a mask, and as we pull the mask off, oh, it's the dark passenger. And as we dig a little deeper and we pull off the mask, it's us again. It's our desires. It's our emotions. It's our feelings. I hate it when somebody close to me burns me like that. When I realize that my problem is me and my feelings and my emotions. And let's be honest, some of us identify ourselves and think of ourselves as the sum of our emotions. Like, my emotions is what makes me. And if what makes you is your emotions, no wonder you're schizophrenic. No wonder you have problems. If what has defined you and made you is the sum of your feelings, you are a basket case. I don't even have to go, you know what I mean? I don't have to analyze you. I don't have to question you. If you simply say that I am the sum of my feelings, you are a terrible wreck.